I'm Bill Oughton of Oughton Claims Management.
I'm Chantal Roberts of CMR Consulting, and welcome to the Art of Adjusting podcast.
Today, we're going to talk about life as an insurance adjuster from the perspective of property, auto, liability, or workers' compensation adjusters. Our goal is to bring interesting topics in the world of claims adjusting to people who are working as an adjuster now and to people who are considering a career as a claims adjuster. Hey, Chantal, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Today, we're going to talk about motorized vehicles.
Yes.
They can be a little bit confusing under a couple of different policy forms. Um, the new products that are out today for the public include things like e-bikes and segways are not actually that new, but we've got these motorized scooters that are running around
Right.
when these forms were written, people didn't contemplate these types of, modes of transportation.
No, and we're still waiting for our flying cars, I believe.
Yeah.
No, and it's a very good point, especially when talking about like the electronic bikes and things. Some people wonder, well, should these be allowed on the road? Should they get licenses? The cyclists, should they have licenses? And there is a guy over here in Overland Park where I'm at. He uh, w- rides on the road one of those mono uh, cycles that are electric.
Okay.
And he looks like the strangest thing because he's leaning and he goes really fast, probably
Yeah.
30, 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
um,
We saw one go by us in the park the other day on a gravel path,
mm,
and he just went around us on the grass, came back up, and like it was no big deal at all.
I
And
have
he was
heart.
a big fella too. He was really a sizable guy to be. I don't know. It looked odd.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have a hard enough time on my bicycle. I like gravel. I ride my bike on gravel, but yeah, I'll spin out and almost fall and all that kind of stuff. I can't imagine doing it on like a unicycle. And I'm not talking like a unicycle bike. I'm talking like it's a thick motorcycle tire and it's an engine somewhere in there
Yeah.
and they're going.
And you stand on it like a
Yeah,
platform.
you stand
Yeah.
on it like a platform.
And
Yeah.
it's hands free, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's what originally was called like a hoverboard.
Possibly.
But
Well, the hoverboards, I don't know.
yeah, me neither. I'm not cool enough
I
to
don't know.
know these sorts of things. I
Right.
have done a scooter though, and they can go, I don't know how fast they can go, but it felt really fast. And because my husband and I were on vacation, we of course didn't have our helmets. And it felt very dangerous because we didn't have our helmets. So
Yeah.
let's get into it, uh,
Sure.
and start talking because I often see, and the reason why I brought up this uh, topic is because I often see this topic come across in articles or in lawsuits where verdicts have come down or a decision has come down, like yes, so and so was a pedestrian and therefore they were struck by an automobile, or no, this bicycle wasn't considered to be an automobile, so this UIM doesn't apply, or whatever. So there's a lot of new ways, like you said, how we can all fit into a policy. For the auto policy, I don't know if it's been updated lately. The one that I have is, where did it go? 2018 is the latest one that I have.
Yeah. So I'm looking at one from '05, so mine's pretty old.
Yeah, so I know, so I thought we'd talk about the homeowners and the PAP, but and I know that there's a new homeowners policy. It was actually released in 2022, but I thought we would just talk about the 2011 since most people still refer to the 2011.
That's the one that I have here.
Okay, cool.
I've got the CPCU handbook.
Oh my God,
Oh,
I do too. But I'm like,
I've got a couple of them up there. This one I think is the newest one I have.
when did you get yours? Because I was thinking I needed to get a new one.
I have no idea how old this one is.
Yeah, because I mean, mine's,
12th 12th edition,
I don't know when mine is. I can't see that far.
2018.
Yeah, it's probably when I got mine too. Okay. Yeah.
And
So,
the funny thing about these policies is that, at the time they're written, the world is a certain way and things change, technology changes, and the policies have to be updated. And there are a lot of older forms out there that are still being used today by different carriers. Um, the URB forms that a lot of my clients use, the small mutuals, they're using versions from 1988.
wow.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, but you
So
said that they do that because that way they don't have to like get things reapproved and stuff.
yeah,
But I had read a very interesting factoid, and I'm not sure that I can repeat it correctly, but this was the essence of the factoid that, in the Victorian times, there was great changes in society, but these changes would happen within decades or maybe 50 years or so. Whereas now, think about what we had and didn't have 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, even
sure.
y- um, we didn't have AI
It didn't.
a couple of years ago.
Well, one thing that always pops up in my world are drones.
Mm,
The aircraft exclusion in the homeowner's policy, as it happens, still works
right,
to exclude drones, which
right.
I think carriers, for the most part, want to continue to exclude those because it's just a risk that they don't want to have attached to the homeowner's policy.
Mhm.
Drone operators out there, if you own a drone, your homeowner's policy is not going to cover it if you damage somebody else's property or hurt somebody with the thing. So
Yeah,
you have to get a separate policy for your drone to cover liability. Um,
right.
Unless
Yeah.
you've got some endorsement on your homeowners or a commercial policy. Some commercial policies, I think, will endorse drone usage onto the CGL, but
That's a good topic we should talk about sometime.
yeah.
Anywho, yeah, so let us move on to
You want to talk about Johnny?
yeah, let's talk about Johnny. What is up with Johnny? Johnny needs to be careful, is what happens with Johnny.
Johnny is our catch-all example of somebody that we use to when I teach people about insurance, I always refer to Johnny. So today we're going to use him, and we're going to use an example about Johnny who hit a pedestrian with his e-bike on the way to work.
Oh, yeah, not paying
Mm,
attention.
friggin' Johnny.
No.
So Johnny wants to be covered under his homeowner's policy for this. He
Okay.
gets a lawsuit. So he calls up his agent and say, "Hey, I need to report this claim." And the agent reports it to the homeowner's policy. And what's going to happen there, Chantal?
Well, okay, so the first thing that the adjuster will do, of course, is start reviewing the policy. And we've got an electronic bike. And of course, an electronic bike isn't necessarily defined in a policy. And we're going to assume that it's going to be like an HO3, which is everything is covered except what's excluded. That's the special form causes of loss, which means right now, tentatively, maybe we're talking about coverage. I don't know. We don't know yet. We need to review our policy. And I would think because we've got a motorized bicycle, we would probably need to be looking at what a quote motor vehicle end quote means in the definition. And again, I'm looking at like your standardized ISO non-endorsed policy. And I think what we had said was I'm using the HO00030511 that I have pulled up. And the definition of a motor vehicle means a self-propelled land or amphibious, meaning both water and land, vehicle, or any trailer or semi-trailer which is being carried on, towed by, or hitched for towing by a vehicle described in A above, which is the self-propelled land or amphibious vehicle. So, is there coverage yet? I don't know. I think next what we would need to do, I mean, I think definitely that bike, the e-bike would
Mm-hmm.
fall under that definition. It is a self-propelled vehicle.
Correct.
So
I think it does meet that definition.
I think what we would need to do next is go to our coverages.
Sure.
And so what we're talking about specifically is bodily injury. So we would just, scroll on down to what, part 2?
Section 2,
Mm,
liability
yeah,
coverages.
section 2. Let's see if I missed it. Nope, haven't missed it yet. Just scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. I feel like I'm just scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Get those doggies scrolling. Okay, where I can't find it. Um,
That's
where
on page 17 if you're on the homeowners.
Well, yes, there it is. Because I saw section 2 exclusions and I'm like, where does section 2 start? Because I'm in section 2 exclusions. Okay, yes, page 17 of 24.
Yeah.
And it talks about personal liability, which says, hey, if a claim is brought against you as the insured because of bodily injury or property damage, which is what Johnny did. He hurt
Yep.
someone
Right.
because of an occurrence. That's the striking of the pedestrian. We
Right.
will pay up to the limit for the damages which you, Johnny, is legally liable. Now, we've
Right.
talked about what legally liable is. We're going to assume he's legally liable in this particular instance. And what we will do is provide a defense. Okay, so sounds like, again, there's coverage right now. We've got a
So far.
motor vehicle
Yep.
and we've got personal liability
Yep.
because it sounds like, from our investigation, just very briefly, we haven't really talked to Johnny yet. We haven't found out, but we're going to assume because he's calling this in that he's liable. He's legally liable. So now we would need to go over to the exclusions. And in the
Hold on.
same,
We got medical payments to look at too.
what we do, medical payments, coverage F,
Yep.
is we will pay the necessary medical expenses that are incurred or medically ascertained within 3 years of the date of accident. We're definitely within that time period.
Sure.
And for an accident causing bodily injury, we do have that. Medical expenses mean blah, blah, blah to a person on the insured location with the permission of the insured to a person off of the insured location, off of Johnny's like house or residence or whatever, if the bodily injury arises out of a condition of the insured location or on the ways adjoining, is caused by the activity of an insurer, so caused by Johnny, caused by a residence employee. I don't think Johnny is rich enough to have a resident employee. Maybe he is. Is he? I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
him.
I don't know. He has a gilded e-bike. So
Well, then I would say that he probably does have like a butler and a maid and maybe a nanny or something. So if one of those people were to cause an injury, then, there would be medical payments. And it's caused by an animal owned or in the care of Johnny. So I don't think that's what it was either. So yes, you're right. He would have medical payments coverage as well, because it says medical
right.
payments to others.
Right. And for the uninitiated, that's medical payments, pays for medical bills, out-of-pocket medical expenses, regardless of whose fault the accident was.
Absolutely. So the next thing, I mean, so it's sounding like there's coverage, but before we get ready to just start writing a check, of course,
Mhm.
the rule of an adjuster on any claim, guys, any claim is to read the policy in the immortal words of Bill Wilson. Read the policy, all of it.
All of it.
Every single page, because I
And the
can't
endorsements.
and well, I mean, that's part of the policy.
Yes.
It's every single page from front to back. Even though we're talking about a liability claim, should you read the property side? Sure. Just get familiar with it if you're just
Mhm.
starting out. Or else when you get to have 25 years experience like Bill and me, you can just skip to section 2. But that's okay.
The
Anyway,
the
so
trick that I use, and this podcast is as much about coverage review as it is about e-bikes and motor vehicles.
yes.
But the technique that I always use is I print the policy, I use a red pen, and I cross off anything that does not apply, and I highlight anything that does apply.
And
And whether it provides coverage or takes it away, that gets highlighted.
that is so important because when we're talking about endorsements, which can give or take coverage, endorsements, or excuse me, exclusions will usually only take away coverage. But when you're talking an endorsement, which can give or take away, what an endorsement can do is say, see section 2, exclusions. A, motor vehicle liability is going to be changed. A1 B is now changed to blah, 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 blah. So you have to go to page 17 on your PAP, your homeowner's policy, and look for section 2, coverage, A, exclusion 1, and then B, cross that out, and then say C, endorsement, yada, 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 so that you, as the adjuster, are making sure that you are applying the correct policy language to the coverage form or to the claim, I guess I should say.
To the claim and eventually to a disclaimer letter. If you're going
Yes.
to deny coverage, you're going to have to quote that language.
Absolutely, and you need to quote the correct language.
Mhm.
Absolutely, yeah. So, anyway, we are looking at, section 2. We're still on page 17, section 2, exclusions. The very first exclusion is a motor vehicle liability exclusion, and so now we're sitting there going, "Oh, well, maybe there's
Mhm.
not coverage." But wait, there may be more, because as I've been explaining, in some of these podcasts that I have been doing that I think you and I talked about off air. I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, and some of the things that these hosts are asking me is, well, where do we go and look for all of these coverages, or where do we go look for all of these exclusions? And I'm like, well, you could go to the exclusion section, but you've got to understand that there is such a thing called an exception to the exclusion, which
Mhm.
means that there's coverage. So even though we're in the exclusion section, meaning that we're not going to cover anything, we still need to read, in the immortal words of Bill Wilson, the entire policy, because there could be, oh, except for this one incident where we're totally going to cover that.
Mhm. Right.
So, because lawyers wrote this, so it's
Yeah.
it's going to be hard. um,
So we give you coverage, then we take it away, then we
and then
give
we
it
give it
back.
back, and then we give it partially back, and then we'd give it totally away, and so you end up owing me $5 is
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
that this is gonna end up working.
I remember having conversations on coverage issues where, when you see a coverage issue, one of the first things that you kind of have to do is let everybody know that, whoa, there's a coverage issue. And I can remember having a conversation with an agent, and I don't remember what the coverage issue was, but I brought it up. I said, look, this is probably covered. And they're like dumbfounded, like, why? I don't understand. And I said, well, there's an exclusion in here. And they're like, but we have this endorsement. Didn't you read the whole policy? I said, not yet. I'm just telling you, there's a coverage question, and I'm going to go through the whole policy, but I just want you to know that this is what is on my desk right now. So yeah, sometimes it's difficult when you've got a policy that's this thick
Hmm.
and you've got to read the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yet you still have to let them know if you have a question. Now, having that conversation with the agent told me right away that there was an endorsement buried in there somewhere. I just got to
Right.
go find it.
Yeah.
So,
And that's helpful. And we'll get to what adjusters should do if like, because we haven't really talked to Johnny yet. We're still doing our policy review, which you should do before you speak to the insured, if at all possible, so that you can have a meaningful conversation with them.
yes and no, because I think there's some questions that you probably have to have answered about the incident before you can really analyze coverage. So it's a chicken egg thing.
Mm,
I can see an argument for both. I can
mm.
see where you want to get the coverage nailed down before you have the conversation so that you can have that intelligent conversation and inform them of any problems. But if you don't know all the facts, you really got to talk to them first.
Well,
Um,
true. I guess my opinion is read the policy, know what the policy says, so that you can ask intelligent questions. And then while you're talking to them, you can apply it in your mind and go, oh, there's this exclusion that I remember reading. And you can talk to the insured while you're going, okay, tell me about the incident, and say, I am going to send you a reservation of rights letter or non-waiver or whatever your state happens to do. But before we go on, we need to finish talking about our coverage. We need to finish going
Yes.
through coverage. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're on section 2, exclusion A, motor vehicle liability, and it specifically says coverages E and F, which was personal liability and med pay to others, do not apply to any motor vehicle liability if at the time and place of the occurrence, the involved motor vehicle is registered for use on public roads or property, is not registered on public roads or property, but such registration is required, is being operated or practicing for prearranged speed racing, rented to others, used to carry persons or cargo for a charge, used for any business purpose except for a motorized golf cart. Okay, just that little bitty section,
Mhm.
immediately we see that motor vehicle, which we said our bike fits into that scenario, is
Right.
not covered if it's registered for public use for public road. Now we don't know that. Let's say we have no idea if a bicycle, an electric bicycle, needs to be registered in that particular state. Okay.
Right.
So this is actually something we would need to look up maybe after we talk to the insured, you
Right.
know?
Right.
But this is what Bill and I were talking about when we said you would want to say, hey, there may be a coverage question. Don't know.
Mhm.
I've got to do some more research. I'm just letting you know heads up. And I will keep you appraised. Okay, so let's go on. It's not being operated for speed, or it's not being rented to another person, any of those other things. Okay, so there's a second exclusion for motor vehicle liability, and that one says, hey, if this other exclusion doesn't apply, there is still no coverage. So we still aren't covering anything, unless, again, that's that exception to the exclusion that I was
Right.
talking about. So there's no coverage. We mean it, period, except for this one particular incident where there is
Right.
coverage
Right.
if it's in dead storage. Well, we
Yeah.
know that's not the case because we know Johnny was riding it.
Right.
Used solely as to service a residence. Well, we know that's not the case.
Right.
Designed to assist in a handicap. And at the time of occurrence, okay, so we know that that's not the case. Designed for recreational use off public roads and and not
And
owned by an insured, which okay, we know this bike, or we assume, because we haven't talked to him yet, we're going to assume that the bike is owned by Johnny. This is again something that we would need to talk to Johnny about when we interview him.
mhm.
um, Owned by an insured, provided that the occurrence takes place on the insured location. Bill, we don't it didn't happen on the insured's location, if I recall correctly, the way that you described it.
Correct. This was on
Okay.
his way to work.
Yeah, so not on the insured location. Insured location, by the way, is in quotes, which means that it has a specified definition,
Yep.
which, by the way, guys, again, spoiler alert, I hate this as an expert witness. When I see your letters of declination, your disclaimer letters, whatever, A, stop having attorneys write them. They write terrible letters. But B, um, if you are going to be quoting policy language that has quotes in it, meaning that those words are defined, you need to also quote what those definitions are. So, for example, in this particular exclusion that I am quoting to you, motor vehicles in quotes, and residence premises is in quotes, insured is in quotes, occurrence is in quotes. So just real quick side note, what I would do is if we were doing our disclaimer letter, our reservation of rights, our non-waiver, our letter of declination, however we want to say it, whatever we happen to be doing, I'd say, you know, there may not be coverage because of XYZ. Here's the policy language. And then I'll go immediately into, you will note that insured is in quotes. This means that the policy has a specific definition for the word insured. The definition for insured is, and then I will go in and quote the policy language. and say, you will note that the policy language that I quoted has occurrence in quotes. The definition for occurrence is, and then I will go in and quote the policy language on the definition of occurrence. And guys, you got to do that because you have to adequately inform the insured.
So what are the consequences if you fail to do that?
The courts could throw out your either reservation of rights, your waiver, your disclaimer, by saying that the insured was not adequately informed, did not adequately understand what you as the carrier were saying is and is not covered, and therefore they being the courts will say, no, carrier, you do owe this coverage. You do owe this claim.
Mhm.
And that, of course, would lead possibly to a bad faith lawsuit. And so you definitely don't want to get involved with that. That just, aggravates everybody. Of course, it's great for me because I get money out of it, but I am trying to put myself out of business, guys. So there you go. Anyway, going on. Continue on. We know that it's not on an insured location. The next one does talk about being off of a insured location, again in quotes, if the motor vehicle, again in quotes, is designed as a toy, not a toy, powered by one or more batteries. Okay, maybe.
Hmm.
I don't know. And not built or modified after manufacture. Okay, so we know we're going to assume we can ask. That can be part of our recorded statement,
Mhm.
you know? That we take with Johnny to find out if he's modified it or not. And yet it still goes on. The policy still goes on. It's like, oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so we also have a motorized golf cart that it talks about. And we're
Yep.
not talking about a motorized golf cart, but we're going to skim it just to make sure it doesn't apply. Motorized golf cart designed to carry 4 people. That's not our bike. Golfing facility, not our area. And then private residential community, including public. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
So while we have an exclusion that may apply, we also have a
An
exception to the
exception.
exclusion because yeah, it's not registered for public roads, so it would be excluded, except that number 2 says all of that applies except for, which means that there's coverage if um, it takes place off an insured location and it's not a toy, but it's powered by one or more batteries.
Batteries.
That right there, that sliver, that little scintilla right there may be where we have coverage. So we have to continue to move on. Okay, so I'm
Mhm.
not seeing anything for watercraft, aircraft, hovercraft. Now we're going down to coverage E, personal liability, and that's our med pay. And again, we've already said this is what we're going to pay. Um, you know, for businesses, insured for professional services, controlled substances. Okay, so on page 20, we get down to our personal liability does not apply to coverage E. Um, well, we do know that coverage, yeah, E. That's where we were, right? Um, okay, does not apply to liability, loss assessments, contracts, property damage, to property owned by you. So if the bike was damaged because you hit someone that Johnny hit someone, he couldn't file a claim for that. Bodily injury to any person to receive blah 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 workers' comp. That's not it. Bodily injury, property damage under a different policy. Yeah, no, I'm not seeing. Okay, so coverage F, medical payments to others. Coverage F doesn't apply to Johnny's resident employee, so his nanny and his butler and his gardener. Again, any persons for workers' comp, nuclear radiation, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Are we agreed, Bill, so far? Have
I
I missed
think
something?
no, I think so. I think we agree that it's generally first of all, it's covered, then it's excluded, but then there's an exception that appears to add coverage back.
Yes, and this is a great example of
Yeah.
having to go through coverage. And there are so many times, and even sophisticated attorneys, and I mentioned this on some of the podcasts, there are so many times when even sophisticated attorneys will just read the first couple of lines and not go through it.
Right.
And I'm like,
And,
nope, you got to go all the way through it.
and to be fair, we're scanning it. We're
Oh
skimming it
yeah.
here. We're really not. I don't think you and I are would be comfortable sitting here saying, "See, we just figured it out." There
No.
is coverage for an e-bike under a homeowner's policy. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying here is that at the stage we are right now, it looks like there's an exception to an exclusion that might give it coverage. There's probably something else buried in here that we haven't gotten to yet, and there may be other endorsements on your policy that would
Right.
have even an even greater effect on coverage. So,
Well, like here's something. There okay, so what state do we wanna be in? Because I found or you found a website for l do e-bikes need to have a license?
right, and there's
And
a website that has them all listed. I
uh-huh,
don't
so
know.
what
We
state do you wanna be in?
New York, only because I looked at that one already
Okay.
and I know the answer.
Okay, so we're going to this and e-bike law handouts. Um, so we're gonna go here and okay. E-bikes are regulated like bicycles. They're not subject to registration, licensing, or insurance requirements that apply to a motor vehicle. So I think that that's rather interesting because a lot of times these e-bikes and even bicycles themselves, and I wanted to bring that up, even human powered bicycles are on the road. And they have the same rights and duties as a vehicle, uh,
Mhm.
although they may not be considered legally to be a vehicle. So they wouldn't have a registration or insurance or something like that. So in this particular instance, like Johnny, if you have an accident, it would fall under homeowners instead of like auto
Right.
in that particular instance. So in one of our policy exclusions, it was saying that it would not be covered. Our motor vehicle would not be covered if they had to have registration. And we know that our e-bike is a motor vehicle, but according to New York's e-bike law, this e-bike does not have to have registration, licensing, or insurance. So again, I'm going to say we've past that hurdle and we're still looking at coverage potentially.
I think
What we
so.
what we need to do next is when we're talking to Johnny, find out about the batteries because that's the exception to the exclusion. Okay, so we've been talking about New York.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to also bring up is because I had looked one up is Hawaii. In Hawaii, you actually do have to register your bike. And what this little blurb says is that e-bike owners are required to register and pay a fee of $30 at any city hall satellite location or the state business registration unit. If you will recall, our policy says that motor vehicles, which is what a e-bike would be, uh,
Mhm.
could not or are excluded if they are registered for use on a public road or property. Now, my interpretation of this blurb from Hawaii is that it's required to be registered. But usually, when you are registering your vehicle, it's like at the DMV. And it was talking about a city hall satellite location. So it could be a registration for like you do your dog or your cat if that makes any sense. Just because something is registered, quote unquote, doesn't mean, there's the exclusion. I'm not going to pay it. Adjusters don't think that automatically. What I want you to do is think the next step. That doesn't make any sense. What
It's
kind of,
interesting to the logic behind requiring a registration on an e-bike. from the municipality standpoint, they may be of the mindset that, well, we need to do this so that if there's an accident and somebody gets hurt, we have a registration for that bike that goes back to the owner. They may not realize by doing that they're eliminating coverage under one of the policies here. So,
Right. Or they could be registering it just to have a record of how many e-bikes they have. And so, do we
mhm,
need to have, I don't know, more bike lanes or devote more money towards bicycles? Or do we need to have this in case so and so says their bike gets stolen because you've registered it, you've put your, lack for a better word, VIN or
mhm.
serial number of your bike into a system so that if it comes up at a pawn shop, that pawn shop will know, oh, this is a stolen unit. So again, just because we've quote unquote registered it, you're right, doesn't mean that we've excluded coverage.
It's funny because I had, I don't know, 5 or 6 Johnny examples for us that we could never go through 5 examples. And I mean,
No, we talk too
it
much.
I mean, we're almost 45 minutes now into Johnny's
Ugh,
e-bike on the homeowner's policy,
I
just on the
know,
homeowner's
just on the
policy.
home. We gotta.
And that just kind of, for people listening, I hope this gives you some perspective into how complex this job can actually be and how, a lot of times I will have a conversation with someone and say, well, there's some coverage questions that we have to look into. And they look at you like they're dumbfounded, like you're supposed to know.
Right. Right.
Well,
They don't realize, and I like to give my students, my risk management students, it's a relatively old article. I think it's back from 2003 or something like that, which if you think about it is almost 20 years old, over 20 years old now. God, I'm old. Anyway, and it talks about the impact of a comma in the policy.
yes.
And there was a lawsuit, and it's called the $10 million comma. And this is one of the things that, of course, Bill Wilson talks about when he's talking about read the entire policy.
Yeah.
Um, because in policies now, they use, I guess, not the Oxford comma. I think it's just the normal thing that everybody is taught where you don't put a comma after every serial. I'm big team Oxford comma, which is a comma after like all the words in a series. And the reason is because of that $10 million comma.
I have a case here. I don't know if this is the same one,
Mm,
but it has a discussion about commas versus semicolons.
yeah. That
And the the law read that, oh, this is a law regarding overtime. So it's not
mhm.
an insurance thing.
No, this was actually it sounds like it was very similar.
Hmm.
It didn't deal with a semicolon, but it did deal with a comma or the lack thereof of a comma, and it did deal with overtime because these workers were coming back saying, "Hey, we deserve to get this overtime," and
That's the one.
the employers were saying, "No, you don't because of this exclusion here." And the judge came back and said, "Well, you don't have a comma before the word and, so therefore, all of that should be read together, and you owe them back pay and overtime."
Hmm.
So that is why Bill and I have talked for 45 minutes on just Johnny's one example when we did have 5 examples to talk
And
about, like lawnmowers. He's riding a lawnmower too. He rides a lot. He doesn't walk anywhere.
no,
Ah,
and everyone, so and we don't have to do deep dives on all these examples, but I think it'd be helpful just to list the examples that I have because these are, for the most part, real life claims that I've dealt with in
mm.
my career, over my career, and they all raise these questions. And okay, so yeah, I
I
did
say we do
6.
it next time too. Um,
We could do a whole year on
we
Johnny.
could, but I know time after next. I'm super excited. Not this coming podcast, but so basically in a month.
Mhm.
We are going to have Quentin Brogdon, who is a
Yes.
plaintiff attorney. And I'm actually super excited about this. So don't everybody boo, because I am of the opinion that everybody needs to hear the opposite opinion, and that is
Oh
how we
yeah,
get better.
yeah.
I have learned so much from the plaintiff bar. I I grew up basically in the insurance world and on the insurance defense side. And so I bought the corporate song and dance. I drank the Kool-Aid, yada yada yada. And then when I was an expert witness and I started being hired by policyholder attorneys, it was eye-opening. And I'm like, oh, you know what? You're right. It can be read that way, and if it can be read that way, that means that it's ambiguous, and therefore we should be, offering that kind of coverage and blah blah blah, yada yada yada. Anyway, yes. So,
I don't deal too much with policyholder attorneys in my most of them are bodily injury attorneys. Um, but I have, there's about a third of them, I'd say, that are people that I can just have a conversation with
mhm,
because we have a lot of the same problems.
right.
The contacting people was one topic yesterday that I was talking to an attorney, and his own client won't call him back,
Wow. Yeah.
and it just seems like today we have so many ways to get a hold of each other, yet it just seems harder to get people to respond.
Yeah. I
I
think
don't
it's
know if it's
because we're
overwhelm or what,
I
but
think that's exactly what it is. But the thing that Quentin will be talking to us about is, the 5 things that are going to push him into filing litigation against the insured and against the insurance company,
okay.
which is, I mean, and I bet dollars to donuts communication is going to be one of them. And we are all overwhelmed, especially as adjusters. And so we don't return those phone calls. And that's what upsets us, which is why, you and I, Bill, we just drone on and on and on and on about it. So, yeah. Um,
Well, it, I often have very long conversations with people on these topics.
mhm.
Whether if it's a client, I mean, it's nothing to have a 90-minute or 2 hour conversation
Mhm.
with a client on just one case. But
Right.
usually, what happens is I'll have 5 different cases with them, and we'll talk about all of them, and it'll be this, and
Mm.
then we look at the clock. We're like, oh my god, we got to go.
Yeah.
And then during that call, I'll get 5 messages,
Mhm.
and those are all going to be our conversations too. It's bizarre.
It's hard
It's
now. It
hard.
really, really is.
Yeah.
So tell us more. Like, we have not gone over the PAP for this one particular. That would be the personal auto
Yeah. And
policy.
I think that would be I mean, we would spend another 45 minutes
I think
easy
so too.
doing, and maybe longer on that policy than because then um, we've got PIP to talk about. And, if
Well,
there's,
PIP is for Johnny's injuries. If Johnny got injured,
so
as opposed.
PIP covers a pedestrian.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm thinking MedPay. Because
Yeah.
I think it depends on your state too, because I
Yeah. Yeah.
believe, like, Arkansas has PIP and MedPay, but Kansas only has MedPay, for example.
Yeah,
Um,
we have our PIP will cover pedestrians and
Although Arkansas may have updated it to where they only have one instead of both, but back in the day, I know that they did have both.
yeah.
Anywho, yeah, you're right. Anyway,
So
fun.
yeah, and so the other examples I have for Johnny here is Johnny hit a friend in his driveway with his riding lawnmower. So now you got to do the same kind of deep dive here because
Mhm.
a lawnmower is that a motorized vehicle? Well, it's motorized,
Well,
got
it's
four
got a motor
wheels,
in it. It runs on
kind
gas.
of a vehicle.
Yeah.
But what if it's a battery operated one?
Well,
Um, because they
then we
make
do
those
have that
now.
exception to the exclusion.
That's
It
right.
talks about the battery.
And here's another example. Johnny drove his riding lawnmower to a gas station and caused a car crash.
Uh-huh.
So then what? What's the thumbs up? I see a
Oh,
thumbs up
you
over there.
have, or I have recognized, sorry. So for those of you who are listening, we have, uh, Zoom has updated basically. And so all of my settings have been reset, and I've turned off recognize hand gestures, which sounds
Oh,
really bad if you're listening to us because we're doing all sorts of hand gestures to the insured. But yeah, so I've turned it off. But if you like sit there and like, we're like, "Blah, blah, blah," and then so the AI in
it detects my
Zoom thinks that you're doing thumbs up, which it will give you a reaction of doing thumbs up.
these
Anyway,
kids these days. I
I
don't know
know these
their
kids these
technologies.
days. Oh my gosh.
So, riding lawnmower to the gas station cause a car crash. That's a whole other can of worms. And then I've got two UTV ones. Now, UTV is a utility. No, what is it?
You transportation, utility transportation vehicle.
I don't. I'm not sure. It's a four wheeler
Yeah,
side
it's
by
a
side.
right.
Almost looks like a car, but it's for off road.
Mm-hmm.
And one example, Johnny rolled his UTV, injuring a passenger on his property. And then same circumstance, but now it's 2.3 miles away from his property on a public road.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, you've got homeowners and personal auto. Maybe one of them covers it. Maybe none of them will cover it. Maybe
Right.
so. Maybe both will cover it. Then you've got a priority of coverage issue. So these are the things that you have to deal with
Oh my.
when you're in claims.
Yes.
And we haven't even covered the first party. So let's say Johnny hits the pedestrian with his e-bike and damages his bike. Does he have coverage under his policy
Not
to
under his homeowners because it did talk about, at least on the liability side.
right?
Now,
We didn't do the first part, the
no, we
first
didn't talk.
party
Yeah, you're
part.
right. We did not do the first party side. Oh my gosh, Bill, claims are so hard. And here's the deal.
This is too hard for me.
Here's the deal. Here's the thing that I get up on my soapbox all the time. So if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look up claims adjusters for insurance companies, it will list like everything that you need to do to become one, what the average median wage is. Are you mostly hired by carriers? Are you mostly independent? It's the government's, idea of what the job is. Here's what they say: for a retail agent, for an underwriter, for an actuary, for a marketer, all of those departments in an insurance company all need college degrees. For a claims adjuster, you just need a high school degree. Now, while I would agree with this, maybe not, because this is a hard job. Like
You have to
we've
be
just
intelligent
said,
for sure.
we've just been
And
talking for like what, 45 minutes about one policy, one section of one policy.
yeah.
And it requires at least a college degree to read it on the flesh reading scale. We
Mhm.
know that. So it's not a high school diploma kind of job, even
No,
though we could train you and totally be that way.
and it is one of those jobs that, um, y- it's open to a lot of people from, it's open to people from a lot of different backgrounds.
Mhm.
And the ones that it's not for them, sometimes it's this stuff that drives them crazy.
Right,
And they're just not, they're not wired for, it's not their happy place.
right.
I mean, is it my
So
happy
then,
place?
therefore, they could
No.
be a field appraiser,
Right. Um,
just writing the estimates.
that's the other cool thing about this business is that there are so many slots that you could fit into.
Right.
If you want to be a coverage guru and just do this all day,
Knock
um,
yourself out.
you certainly can.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I my job is a mix of all of it. I have to do the liability investigation as well. And in the claim that I just brought up here with Johnny hitting the pedestrian on his bike,
Hmm.
we could spend another 45 minutes talking about the investigation required for that claim.
Absolutely. Yeah, because this is just like what I've always told my adjusters when I was a claims manager is when you get a new claim, it takes an hour to set up a new claim. And they're like, no,
Mhm.
it doesn't. I'm like, yes, it does. And this is the very reason why it takes an hour, which, if we happen to have any CEOs, C suite people, hire more claims adjusters because you are giving them 5 claims a day, and if it takes an hour to set up a new claim, that's 5 hours, and then if you are on the phone talking to your client, Bill, for 2 hours, there's 7 hours, you have an hour lunch, well, that's the whole day. You have not looked at emails, you have not returned phone calls, you have not actioned any of your old claims,
Mhm.
you
Yep.
know? And this is why we need more adjusters. If
Mhm.
you are C-suite, stop your hiring freeze. I guarantee you, you will do better. You will have more profits. I guarantee. I know it sounds like you wouldn't. It sounds counterintuitive, but this is the life.
Yeah.
This is what it takes to be a claims adjuster. It takes an hour.
And I come across overwhelmed people all the time, fellow adjusters of all sorts that are just beyond their
Mhm.
capacity,
Absolutely.
and begging for help goes seems to go unnoticed in many cases.
Did you hear
And
about farmers?
yes, I'm. eh, Remind me, you know it better than I do because I can't bring it up in my head right now.
Okay, so
But I did.
apparently farmers, adjusters, an anonymous group, have filed a formal complaint with, I
Yes.
believe it was the Department of Insurance and probably the Secretary of State or
Labor
District
board.
Attorney, Labor Board, something like that. I mean, it's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
it's big. And what they are saying is that the adjusters, and again, guys, this is the adjusters because I get it. If you're trying to cut expenses, where do you cut it? You cut it from where money is going out, and you think that that is the claims department, but it is not. All of these adjusters were like, we were y'all bought MetLife, part of MetLife. We had to take over their claims without any kind of training, in addition to all of the others that we were handling. In 2023, you fired or laid off 11% of the adjusting staff nationwide, for farmers. That gave us more claims, the ones that had to stay or, did stay, that weren't laid off. We have asked you for more people. You refuse to hire us. You have put us out as contract people when in fact we are not, just so that you could save on expenses and taxes and workers' comp and yada, yada, yada. So it is a huge, huge deal going on right now with farmers adjusters. They are overworked, they are fed up, and they have reported the carrier to the Department of Insurance and have begun asking for help.
Mhm. Interesting. Well, we have been talking for many years about the shortage of available
Yes.
adjusters
Yeah.
to the industry,
Mm.
and that's another issue. Now, it is funny because if I get on social media and I tap into there's kind of this group of people out there that want to become adjusters. I get them all the time. I mean, I for a while I was volunteering to review people's resumes, and
Mhm.
I had too many. I couldn't do them all.
Mhm.
And so there are people out there who want to get into this business. Um, but many of them don't have a college degree. And so, we can have conversations about whether or not that should disqualify somebody. That's another topic for another, show,
Right.
I guess. But what I think that uh, insurers need to consider is amping up their training and, and actually hiring more people to handle
Absolutely.
claims.
Technically, that's what we are supposed to be talking about next. time is the journey from novice to expert. How you begin and how you get to be, with us, besides listening to us, where we walk you through everything because we're
Right.
geniuses. um, you know, uh,
There was something I wanted to say about the term expert earlier, and
yeah,
it is that if you are if you are an expert in this field, no claim is easy.
no. If you think
It
it
is
is, you're doing it wrong. And that and
right.
that's and that's kind of I remember back in the day when I was just like, this is a great job. It's so easy. And it was because I didn't know any better.
Yeah,
Also, one of the things that we are going to be having on, let's see, October the 10th, we are going to be talking more about adjuster education because I completely agree. One of the things that have changed over the past 20 years or so, I would say, is that companies no longer educate or push education for their adjusters. And again, I think it is a cost saving thing on their part, but they're shooting themselves in the foot. Because if the adjusters were better educated, there wouldn't be as many lawsuits, there wouldn't be as many unhappy customers, there wouldn't be as many unhappy everything. And so Charlene Hoskins is going to be talking to us about adjuster education in October. So
cool.
that'll be great as well. We have been talking way too long, and like you said, it's complicated. So yeah. Um,
Well, I think we've beat the hell out of this one again.
Out of Johnny at least.
Poor Johnny.
Poor Johnny.
I think I want a Johnny doll or something, or a Johnny maybe poster
That would be good.
for he can be
Don't tempt me. You know I'll do it.
the poster child for confusing claims.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, well, great. I can't remember
We're
again. What's our next one with
Our, so
the attorney?
we are going to be doing journey from novice to expert. So we're going to be talking, which is a passion of yours,
Yeah,
of educating
yeah.
the people who listen to us. We
And
oh,
but our guest
we have like a new person who listens to us, besides Brandon.
Eli.
Eli. That's
Hi,
hi Eli.
Eli.
Hi Eli. I want to start doing like shout out to our
Shout
four
outs.
listeners.
Yes, we have four listeners: Eli,
Eli.
Brandon, Chantel, and William.
Well, and there's Scott.
Oh,
Um,
Scott.
yes, Scott. So Scott Bushnell, he listens to us as well. So
Okay.
technically, we have three
Yes, yes.
listeners, and then us two who
Oh,
talk
he's
all the
from
time.
Aimco, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So
All right.
we're gonna have a new section because right now we can just keep on shouting out to our three listeners.
That's right. That's right.
Anywho, yeah. So Journey to Novice, which is a very passionate. You're
Our
very
guest
passionate
name.
about that.
What I couldn't remember was our guest's name.
Oh, we don't have one. For next week.
Oh,
Week
for next
after
week.
next. Week after next, which it will be on July. No, I'm sorry, August 1st. So it'll be on August 1st is
Okay.
Quentin Brogdon, who is the
Quentin
attorney.
Brogdon. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that'll be the 5 things that'll push you into litigation and how to avoid them. Um,
That's actually going to be a great
it's going to be
episode because
fantastic.
and he does primarily first party lawsuits against.
No, I think he does. I think he also does like third party litigation,
Okay.
like bodily injury.
The concept is
It's
pretty
pretty much
much the
this.
same. You got to
Yeah,
read the
it is.
policy, and if they violated the policy and bad faith and all that. So
Yeah, it's going to be pretty much the same. Yeah. But I am super duper looking forward to that.
yeah,
Because I like learning from the other side. I think you can have a good conversation with someone who's on the opposite side of the fence
yeah.
from you. Yeah.
And
Um,
nobody ever asked to come on the show. We usually go out and ask people if they want to be a guest, and
yes.
some of them say yes, and some of them say no.
Yeah. Oh God, no, we're
But
not talking to you.
But
Oh, really?
if you want to come on and talk with us about something interesting, please do.
You're
We
so
can't.
nice.
We are so nice,
We are
but we're not
very
going to.
nice.
If you have a product or something to promote, we'll mention it. We're not going to become an infomercial for that product, but we're glad to have people who have new tech or new ideas or even questions. I
Right.
mean, I would love to have somebody who's new to the business come on
You
and
know,
just ask some questions to us and we can
we
answer them.
had Brandon. Brandon came
We
on,
did. Yes. Yeah.
and he kind of gave us his feedback of what it's like to be a new adjuster, what he does to decompress,
Hmm.
how he has learned in this kind of environment to meet other adjusters and
Hmm.
talk to he uses Facebook, for example.
You know
Um,
what I think would be a really popular episode is if somebody who heard about the claims adjusting career but didn't know anything about it came on and just asked us what it is, what's the work like, how much money can I make, can this be, all those very simple, they're not simple questions, but
well, yeah,
they're the basic questions that someone might have, um, that doesn't know anything. And I bet you that that would get more listens than any of our other podcasts
we should
because
we should see. We should put something out on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah, if you are a college graduate and you're
Mm,
looking for a new career and you want to learn about this business, then give us a shout.
come on down. You're the next contestant.
Yes,
Okay. All right. So we got it.
we
And
do.
that's it.
All
So,
right.
hey, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for joining us on the Art of Adjusting podcast, where we talk about life as an insurance adjuster.
If you enjoyed this podcast or this episode, please give us 5 stars and a review. It does help the algorithm pick us up.
Hit that subscribe button real quick and tell all of your adjuster friends to check this out as well. For independent adjusting services, go to www.auton.claims. And for anyone interested in working as an independent liability adjuster, go to the Contact Us tab to join our roster.
In the meantime, you can contact me at theartofadjusting.com for consulting and training purposes.